All right, there we go. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the dot plot and how it is that the Federal Reserve is not really liking this tool. In fact, there are a couple of Fed officials who have now come out and actively stating that the use of the dot plot may no longer be an effective tool, and some of them are actually regretting it. Now, this is pretty interesting when you think about where it is that the dot plot came from and what it was really intended to do, because most people look at the dot plot, which is the Federal Reserve pretty much predicting where it is that they feel interest rates will be, or the Fed funds rate will be going into the future. And it's not a prediction like this is where we exactly think it's going to be. It's based on the idea of where the current circumstances are. So it's a little confusing for a lot of people, because when people see the dot plot, they think about it being something that is like locked in stone. Like, this is them putting it out there in a way that is committed, right? And it's not the case. It's really just basically saying this is where the different members of the FOMC believe that interest rates, based on the current condition, will be going into the future. And so a lot of times, as people take this into a deeper, like, committed view of the Federal Reserve, it creates a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt when it doesn't play out. Okay, so now I've came across this article and I left it down in the description for you guys. There's a few different links. This particular one, I'm going to cruise down to the bottom of this article where it says why the dot plot was created. Fed officials started using the dot plot in 2012 at a time when the economy was still recovering from the great financial crisis and when interest rates were still near zero. Now, again, this article is coming out of, let me just give the bank rate, right? This is June 18th of 2025, so it's fairly recent. And it goes on to say, it was a form of, quote, aggressive forward guidance. Aggressive forward guidance. A concept that former Chairman Ben Bernanke created to prepare markets for the Fed's movement away from the unconventional support measures it introduced to keep the economy afloat, according to Ryan Sweet, chief economist at Oxford Economics. So now this forward guidance, this is pretty interesting stuff to think about, because up until 2012, the Federal Reserve was really quite quiet about their policy and what it is that they were planning on doing going into the future. But when they hit the lower bound of zero, they knew that the adjustment of the Fed funds rate was no longer going to be an effective tool, and that they would have to come up with other means of guiding the markets or other means of guiding monetary policy. And this is where the forward guidance came into play. Now, we've talked about this quite a bit. Ben Bernanke knew at the time that of this situation, he knew years ahead of time. Years ahead of time, because he put out a speech called Deflation and How to Prevent It from Ever Occurring that literally came out 6 years before the great financial crisis. And in that speech, he was talking about what would happen when the Fed funds rate achieved the lower bound of zero, and that they would be using tools such as forward guidance. And so this was definitely a tool that they knew they were going to be using way ahead of time. All right. It goes on to this. This is something that Neil Kashkari, right, Fed president, most of the time, I regret having to fill out the SEP. This is the Statement on Economic Projections. This is where the Federal Reserve gets the dot plot from. All 19 members of the FOMC put their predictions in, and he is saying it right here. Most of the time, I regret having to fill out the SEP. He goes on to say, once in a while, I'm really glad we have the SEP. I wish I could just use the SEP when I want to use the SEP. Think about that for just a minute. Here it is. They're trying to be more open and transparent and giving you this idea of where it is that they are feeling and thinking and behaving. And the dot plot is really the essence of this, right? The statement on economic projections. And what Kashkari is saying, it was just like sometimes it's a really useful tool and other times it's a very damaging tool, or it's not useful and he regrets having to use it. He regrets it. This is something interesting to think about. Now, when you go and you look at some of the things that other Fed officials have said, and this is something that I have brought up many times in the past, but again, this is Philip Jefferson, right, who, let me bring it up here, who has done quite a few speeches talking about how the Federal Reserve uses their communications for their monetary policy. Now, this is something interesting that that he says in this speech. This speech is May 13th of 2024, communicating about monetary policy. This is what it has to say. During the tenure of Chairman Bernanke, there was another burst of innovation in the way monetary policy was communicated. In 2007, the first SEP was published to convey systematically the economic outlook of the FOMC participants. In 2011, Chairman Bernanke started holding press conferences after every FOMC meeting. In 2012, the Fed adopted an explicit inflation target of 2% and started publishing individual FOMC participants' views of the appropriate future path of the Fed funds rate, now famously known as the dot plot. During these years, Loretta, in her capacity as the research director of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, contributed to ongoing work on communications in collaboration with the policymakers and the Federal Reserve Board staff. All right. See, up until 2012, they didn't have any real way of communicating how it is that the people were going to understand the Federal Reserve, the FOMC's idea of what was going to be taking place in the future. And they come up with this dot plot to say, hey, we can't tell you exactly who is where, but there's 19 spots for every year on where it is that the members of the FOMC believe that interest rates are going to be. And with this, people then use that as gospel. And this is where the breakdown started to take place. And in fact, it is communicated in here, just that very thing. Hold on one second, let me find it. Surely, sometimes central bank communications have unintended consequences. Let me give you two examples. First, there is always the risk that policymakers' statement about their economic outlook or their expected future path of the policy rates, right? This is him describing the SEP. The future path of the policy rate are interpreted by the public with a false sense of certainty. This is where a lot of times people look at the FOMC and say, nah, they've already committed themselves to future interest rate cuts. The SEP, the Statement on Economic Projections, otherwise known as the dot plot, is not a committed view. It's not. And so many people misunderstand this. This is one of the reasons why so many people think the Fed is just bumbling along, don't know what they're doing, keep, reversing, keep backing up, keep screwing up, all this other stuff. And I'm thinking the whole time they haven't done anything. They're sitting on their hands, literally doing nothing. But this SEP and how it is that they have given this statement out there to guide the future of understanding of what has taken place within the Fed funds rate has a profound impact on the economy. They don't have to do anything. They can just put out this forward guidance. And now it's becoming a nuisance. It's not just Kashkari who said this. Let me bring it up here. This is, who was this? Who said this one? This is coming from San Francisco Daily, right? Words have power, which is a great tool, but words can be harder to reverse than the interest rate. This is Daly saying this. It can be harder. It can be harder to deal with the fact that this is happening, that they have come out with this idea that there is going to be interest rates coming in the future based on the statement on economic projections. People took it in as a committed view, and it's very difficult to reverse that without thinking, oh, the Fed's bumbling along or acting like Mr. Magoo or don't know what they're doing. It's people's misunderstanding of what was taking place in the first place. They set expectations. This is Daly, right? They set expectations which can be hard to change in the event the economy evolves differently than we expected. I think that's pretty interesting. Let me see. It goes, what was the other quote here? The lesson for me from that period. Okay, talking back here. Let me back it up. In 2021, the Fed said it would keep expanding its balance sheet. It would not raise rates until inflation was back on track to exceed 2%. See, admitting it right there. How many people think that the Federal Reserve was going to a 2% target? It was almost admitted right there, to exceed 2%. Right? An approach I felt was warranted given that inflation had underrun the 2% goal for years. Analysis and many Fed policymakers now say they believe that the Fed was late to start raising rates to fight rising inflation, in part because of this definitive guidance. They didn't know. People didn't know that the Federal Reserve was looking to run inflation extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time, even though they openly admitted it. They straight up said it, right? And then people didn't want to hear it, and they said, well, the Fed has just gotten away from them, so they don't know what they're doing. Meanwhile, they're actually regaining exactly what it is that they were looking for. They wanted inflation to run extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time, and it was somewhat admitted right there. In 2021, the Fed said it would keep expanding its balance sheet and would not raise rates until inflation was on track to exceed its 2% goal. I mean, Daly admitted it's just it's like so obvious to me so many times when I start going through this information on how it is that they are using forward guidance, literally gaslighting, in order to continue on with their operations. The Fed is currently reevaluating its policy framework, and Daly said her remarks were not specifically about that effort. The Fed is also expected to redo its approach to communications, including potential changes to its so-called, quote, dot plot, setting out Fed policymakers' expected rate paths and used by markets as a guide to where the Fed expected rates to go. So they were pushing that expectations into the markets. They did it on purpose. This is how they were able to conduct their monetary policy. It's not what everybody thought it was. Everybody thinks it's stuck on interest rates. They think it's the Fed funds rate. They think it's like somehow the president and, I don't know, some sort of effort that he has. I don't know where it comes from. None of that stuff is true. Right? Even the idea of how it is that the Federal Reserve sets interest rates, it's not like Jerome Powell has the ability to make that happen on his own. When I hear so much communication coming from the administration saying, man, once we get Powell out of there, everything's going to change. And I'm thinking, you do realize that there is 19 members to the FOMC, 12 voting members, 5 alternates, 2 advisors. All these people are coming up with the monetary policy. Jerome Powell is literally the spokesperson. He speaks on behalf of the FOMC. When they say, hey, we need to communicate something out there to the public, and the public wants to, or in the FOMC wants the public to hear it at a press conference, it comes from the delivery of the chairman, who is Jerome Powell, speaking on behalf of the FOMC. He is a messenger, period. You shoot the messenger, the message doesn't change. That's so important to understand here. I'm going to dive into something else here real quick, just to kind of share it with you. Let me see if I saved it. Is it in here? stable coins. This is the other big one, right? I think stable coins coming into this game is going to really change the way that a lot of this stuff is being conducted. Right? And I think that after we see the establishment of these stable coins, we're going to find a completely different monetary policy. Something unlike anybody has ever seen before. The ability for the Federal Reserve, the administration, for whatever, the powers that be out there, for them to be able to control the currency with a stable coin is something unlike anything that they have ever had before. To be able to direct money, to be able to put a time limit on it, to be able to put it in the hands of some people or take it away from other people at literally at the entry of a keyboard. I don't know like how to describe it in the sense, but it is like literally a central banker's dream, right? And to find that they are naming it things like the Genius Act is only leading me to believe that they are going to convince the people that this is something that it is not. And ultimately, what it comes down to is that stablecoins introduction is literally to bring in negative interest rates. And now negative interest rates, I'm assuming, is going to be the needed tool for when the communications are breaking down. When you find that Daly and Kashkari are regretting the tools that they have, think about that. They are now looking to other things to adjust monetary policy in order to conduct monetary policy. And this is going to be very critical to understand and know. Most people, when they take on this understanding of stable coins, they're going to take it in a much different fashion from what it is that the original thought behind it was strategizing behind. Right? Because really what it comes down to is being able to take interest rates into negative territory. That's literally what the whole concept was for. Now, there is going to be all kinds of other things that take place during this time, right? That people are going to look and they say, oh man, look how they control. This is, another way of the powers that be are, setting up to enslave you and all kinds of other stuff. The problem with that theory is that you were warned way ahead of time that you don't have to participate in this, but people won't take the warning, right? I mean, the warning came a long time ago. If I was able to put out a YouTube video talking about this, like, I don't even know how many years, 7 years ago or something like that, right? If I was able to put out videos talking about this exact thing, then they were warning you. I mean, I took the warning. I was thinking, wow, man, if this actually does take place, I'm going to have to position myself with at least that thought in mind that it's a possibility. Now, what it is that I'm doing, I don't know if it's the appropriate thing. I'm hoping it's the appropriate thing. Time will tell if it's the appropriate thing. But to understand that the introduction of stablecoins is to go into negative territory. That is it, right? And so knowing that all this communication breakdown and the Fed funds rate and, president wants to take over the Fed and there's all this, like, how do I put it? Like negative energy that's built up around this thing that says we need to change and shift and make it something that it's not, right? Something that is completely different. Think about the issuance of these stable coins. It's like, oh my gosh, man, this is almost like the perfect excuse to just have people to say, oh yeah, that's the way it needs to be, or that's the way it should be. I don't know how many people I listen to who have no idea what it is that the Federal Reserve is doing up to communications, dot plot, and none of that stuff, but they definitely know Jerome Powell's the problem. Tell me they ain't saying, look over here, right? You got to follow the money. Don't follow, it's not the people, right? It's the money themselves. The people will change. People will change. Eventually the president will be different, chairman will be different, right? All the presidents will be different. There'll be somebody different, but the money, right? If you're still keeping your eye on the money, you don't have to keep your eye on the people, right? You keep your eye on that money and then the things that the people are saying about it. Now you got something to watch. Right? Don't take your eyes off the money. All these people, look over here at this, look over at that, look at these politics, look at this war, look at this, event that took place with trade, look at these people doing all these things over here in these BRICS nations, look at all this other stuff. And I'm like, I see that stuff off in the distance, but I'm focused in on the money. I'm just going to keep it on the narrow, right? I'm going to keep it focused in on this money, because the money is the thing that you should be following while they're trying to distract you with all the other crap that's going on out there, especially things like, I'm going to replace Jerome Powell with myself, and I'm going to be king of the Fed and all that other, like, it's completely delusional thinking and does not benefit you one little bit to even strategize on that kind of thought, right? Does not work for you, you know? So when we start understanding that their communications are no longer an effective tool and that it's not working as well for them like they once had it working for them, and we know that there was a time that they did not communicate, like this is new. All this communication and forward guidance and all that other stuff, this is new. This isn't something that they had done in the past. In fact, here, let me go back into Jefferson's speech, because they actually break it down pretty good right in here. Right? It was in 1981, Karl Brunner, the Swiss monetary economist, called central banking an esoteric art and lamented central banks' quote, an inherent impossibility to articulate its insight in explicit and intelligible words and sentences. Like the Federal Reserve and all the central bankers around the world and all the economists just thought that they were just too smart. Right, that their understanding of economics and everything that was going on was just literally too high of a thought for the average everyday person to understand, right? There was impossibility to articulate its insights in explicit and intelligible words and sentences. They could not communicate. They had no ability to do it. It was impossible, right? And at the time, they didn't even want to do it, right? It goes on to say, at the time, central banks, banking wisdom dictated that monetary policy makers should say as little as possible. Some research of that vintage tried to rationalize this, quote, secrecy through the notion that monetary policy would be particularly effective if it surprised the markets. Wow, it sounds to me like Kashkari, who regrets it, Daly, who regrets it, seems to want to have the ability to surprise the markets instead, because this communication is being received in a way that is difficult to undo, and it's being received in a way that they were not anticipating people to receive it as, right? So they say, maybe if we just didn't say anything at all and just used our actions, things would be a little bit easier to conduct. Well, it's very difficult to use your actions to conduct your monetary policy if you have no ability to act. That was the case at the lower bound of zero. But if the lower bound of zero is no longer a lower bound and you have the ability to go into negative interest rates, well, then there's no need to talk anymore, because you can use your interest rate adjustment policy as the main policy tool, because it could be particularly effective if it surprised the markets. And this was a theory that they used to use back in the day, before the communication became the main policy tool that is now somewhat being regretted, right? Being in the regret energy of the Fed. I don't know how you want to call it. Like, some of them probably still really like it. Anyway, here, let me read on some more of this, because it's really good, right? It says in the 1990s, the central bank communication changed dramatically. In 1993, the Fed started to publish the FOMC meeting minutes in their current form. And in 1994, it began releasing FOMC meeting transcripts with a 5-year lag. In February of 1994, the Fed started to publish post-FOMC meeting statements following the meetings at which there was a change in the intended federal funds rate. So they started literally telling, hey, man, if we have a meetings in which we intend to change, we're going to let you know. And then in May of 1999, the FOMC started publishing statements after every meeting. Hey, let's just keep giving them this forward guidance. It's working so well. Even on occasion when there was no change in policy, by then the move toward greater transparency was fully embraced by Chairman Greenspan, who had once prided himself on mumbling with great incoherence. Like, he used to do it on purpose, try to keep people from understanding what the hell it was that he was saying. All right? Goes on, there are two primary reasons for this change. First, it was thought that the greater transparency would demonstrate the Fed's accountability to the public and safeguards safeguard its political independence. And second, there was a growing appreciation in economic profession that clarity about policy could improve macroeconomic outcomes. They knew that if they started talking and telling you stuff, that you would behave in a way that was most appropriate for their monetary policy. It's like they were front loading it. Yeah. Totally worked too. Expectations became a focal point in academic and policy circles with the emergence of the new Keynesian models in the 1990s as a framework for monetary policy. In these models, aligning the expectation of decision makers in the private sector with those of policymakers produced superior economic outcomes. Mike Woodford, one of the developers of the new Keynesian model, put it this way: not only do expectations about policy matter, but very little else matters. This is how they do it, guys. Yeah. See, understanding that this whole dot plot and everything that was around it was literally an attempt to create the gold machine, right? The gold machine, the hypothetical gold machine that Ben Bernanke talked about, that if the information of a guy who invents a gold machine is scientifically verified and proven and public and widely publicized, the price of gold would plummet on the market before the guy even produced a single ounce of gold. This hypothetical story of, or the story of this hypothetical machine is the theory that is now being used, right? That was the theory of how monetary policy could operate, and it is what is being deployed today. And in a lot of ways, it's run its course. If you think about it, Daly and Kashkari are already saying maybe we shouldn't be talking so much. Why? I mean, aren't you wanting the public to be informed? Oh, I'm sorry, they misinterpret what it is that you're saying, because the forward guidance that you are putting out there is being used in a way that then creates the expectations that you were looking for. And if the expectation is locked in a way that you were like, hey, we were trying to be data dependent, right? And people are like, nah, you had a committed view. Well, now they have a problem. This is something that they admit. They actually use that against you. Right? And yeah, it actually creates for better policy. They even say it. Here, I'll show you. Like later on in the speech, he goes into saying just that. This is why policymakers always make sure to stress their data dependence of future path. Second, it is possible that public misinterprets the views of individual policymakers as a committee view. The potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. You know, they don't have to come out and talk. They do that on purpose. Like, they don't have to come out and do news interviews and stuff like that. That is something that is fairly new. Back prior to the 90s, they didn't do that. They certainly didn't do it to the level that they are today. And if you did hear anything from the Federal Reserve, it was from the Federal Reserve Chairman, and it was Greenspan, and nobody understood what he was saying anyway. Now they got all the Fed officials coming out all at the same time, all disagreeing with each other. This isn't something that they used to do. This is fairly new. The potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. The diversity of viewpoints among policymakers lends itself to stimulating debates and ultimately better policy. But in such a situation, more communication could increase rather than reduce uncertainty about the policy. And that's the complaint that Kashkari and Daly are having. They know this. They know that their tool needs to be refined. Right? They know that it doesn't always work out for them. And very, very, very few people actually really look at the idea that their communications as the main policy tool, because even after I do this video, the very next question they're going to ask is, are they going to cut at the next meeting? And I think to myself, man, you're going to miss it. You don't know, you are not going to know how to position yourself if you're waiting for the meeting. Okay? And if you are planning on asking that question, are they going to cut at the next meeting? The very next question should be asked, where do you think the neutral interest rate is? Because the neutral interest rate is going to be the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And if the neutral interest rate is rising or has risen, and it's very close to the Fed funds rate, if they were to cut rates, they very well could land at neutral or be stimulating or restrictive. depending on where the neutral rate is. See, most people are looking at the elevated Fed funds rate as being a restrictive economy, and I think to myself, elevated inflation expectation makes the economy less restricted, as it pulls the neutral interest rate ever higher. Very few people take this into consideration. I cannot find anybody talking about the neutral interest rate out there. When they do, it's very brief and it's very I don't even know how to put it. It's just like kind of swept under the rug, like, neutral interest rate, that's what the Fed thinks is going to be interest rates in the future, where the Fed funds rate thinks that they're going to be locked in like in 3, 4, or 5 years from now. And I'm like, no, that's not the neutral interest rate. The neutral interest rate exists here and now. We just don't know exactly where it is because you can't observe it in real time. And knowing that the neutral interest rate had been falling over the previous 25 years and it was very close to zero, that screwed the Federal Reserve and their monetary policy. And understanding that is the key to understanding why it is that the Federal Reserve is hardly moving and using this forward guidance instead. All right? People say, they don't need to use those old tools. They can use the adjustment of the Fed funds rate because they're no longer at the lower bound of zero. This is not true. This is not true at all. They are definitely using forward guidance. They are using this dot plot. They are using all this meeting minutes and everything that goes with it to guide the markets. This is part of the policy, and they are finding where it's not necessarily the effective tool they want it to be. If they go back into interest rate adjustments being the effective tool where they are actually surprising the markets, all this stuff needs to go away. They can't tell you the dot plot. They can't give you, open market, like this understanding of the what the Federal Open Market Committee is doing. They would have to take all that away and then surprise you with interest rate adjustments as being the effective tool. Now, in order for that to be, they have to get the neutral interest rate higher in order to make the adjustment of the interest rates to be an effective tool. If you had the neutral interest rate very close to zero, and it was still close to zero, you could drop the Fed funds rate back to zero and still not be able to stimulate the economy because you can't drop it far enough below the neutral interest rate. This is not me saying this. This is the Federal Reserve, right? And don't, here, let me just give it to you right here. This is... all right. Why does the neutral interest rate mean for monetary policy and anchoring of inflation expectations? When a recession hits, central banks may not be able to reduce interest rates well below their neutral level to stimulate the economy as warranted because of the effective lower bound. This is coming from John Williams in 2018. This was the problem that they faced. It was just like, oh crap, if we go into a recession and we hit the lower bound of zero, we will not be far enough below neutral to stimulate the economy. How do we deal with this problem? Right? Because the problem that they were facing, right, was stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. And that low neutral interest rate consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. And ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. How many people understood that the Federal Reserve was absolutely, desperately in need of inflation in order to save their policy? And every single person during COVID who was watching the Federal Reserve keep interest rates extra low, extra long for an extended period of time, while at the same time going into massive balance sheet expansion, was looking at it as a hyperinflationary scenario and absolutely making a dream event take place for the Federal Reserve as they were desperately looking for that elevated inflation. The problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. So everybody's saying they screwed up, and the Fed is like, yeah, keep thinking that, guys. Keep thinking we screwed up, because that is making this job a whole lot easier. Nobody thinks it that way. Nobody sees it this way. Except for the Federal Reserve, the FOMC, and the Uneducated Economist and the crew here. We're the only ones. I don't know why. I mean, it's like it's stated right here by the Fed themselves. I mean, nobody else is talking this way. I mean, maybe they just made all this stuff up to fool the UE and the UE channel and the people here and the few thousand people who know about this. Maybe that's what they did. They just made all this stuff up to fool the few thousand people here. Good job, guys. I mean, got me good. You guys got me good. You know, I mean, come on. Let me just put this little sunblock right there. Keep cooking my phone. All right. How long are we into this? 35 minutes. I keep these videos too long. Nobody likes them. Right? Except for the people who are here. All-nighter. Great to see you, man. Even that assumes the lenders lend at low rates. I guess you guys are talking about something. Okay. I'm a street... oh, God, Lord. Excuse me, guys. I'm a street black market economist. The poor are ready to riot. They're not. They're not ready to riot. They're not ready to riot because they have food. So long as you have food, they're going to be cool. Like, you know, it's when 50% of your income goes to buying food. That's when the poor will riot. That's when the people will riot. But as long as they can eat, they don't. They may riot in some areas, you know, during some things, but as far as like overthrowing and revolution of the government and stuff like that, yeah, once you pay 50% of your income goes to food, the majority of the people who are doing that, it's on. So if you want a moment, that's where it's going to be. Tariffs equal inflation. I think tariffs equal inflation expectations. Like, what tariffs? I mean, this is what's funny about it. It was just like, didn't I hear something about Donald Trump saying he could do whatever he wanted when it comes to July 9th, whether the tariffs happen or don't happen? And he's saying something, well, we could do whatever we want, right? And I'm thinking, so what does that say? And you're not going to go through with it? Like, that's the answer? It's like, we can do whatever we want? I'm thinking, well, that's not really like threatening. You know, like, you got to have a real good threat behind it. It was like, oh, hell yeah, we're going to do it. You know, like, I mean, like, oh, we can do whatever we want. I was like, well, okay, so you're basically saying you're not, you know? It was just like, that's what it comes down to. Because he's probably tired of being called a liar or a chicken or whatever. And I don't blame him, because this was all theater anyway, to create elevated inflation expectation that raises the neutral interest rate, moves it ever closer to the Fed funds rate. It makes the economy less restricted, and then people wonder why we have such a resilient economy, with the S&P hitting record highs and the unemployment still staying historically low, although it is rising, and people want to talk about the weak and devastated labor market. I look at it on a chart here by the Federal Reserve, and I'm thinking, well, according to what it is that they're looking at and their monetary policy data, they're not worried about unemployment being that high yet. Like, they don't need to act upon it because unemployment is still historically low, right? And again, we can take it with much different information and say, oh no, dude, unemployment's way higher, labor market's way weaker, everything's all that other stuff. And that's true. I mean, I would probably go with that and say you're accurate and say that's right. But that's not right in the sense that we can't make the Federal Reserve look at that information. And we can't make them conduct monetary policy based on the information that we are looking at. We can only take in the information that the Federal Reserve is looking at to understand what their monetary policy is going to be doing, so that we can appropriately position ourselves on account of it. We can't fix it. Right? And I'm not saying join them. What I'm saying is, like, look at what it is that they are looking at to conduct themselves, and then say, okay, if you guys are going to look at that, and then I'm going to understand that you're probably not going to be very concerned if you're looking at unemployment being low. So as people are like, labor market's getting really weak, the Fed has no other choice, and I'm like, okay, over on what the Fed is looking at, nope, you guys are wrong. Right? Fed ain't concerned about it yet. They may say it, but they're not. Like, I mean, they're not that concerned. Yeah. And they're not that concerned about inflation because they wanted moderately above 2% for some time. So it seems to me like they're not going to come out and say, hey, we got exactly where we want it. We're in the golden spot, guys, kicking ass. Like, that's not something that they communicate out there for the people. And I mean, because if they did, they'd be like, oh no, here's all the reasons why you're causing all this pain and suffering and misery. And they're like, well, yeah, but that was kind of part of the plan, right? I mean, right? I mean, Jerome Powell said it was going to cause pain and misery. August 27th of 2020. It says right here, inflation that is persistently too low, it says here, Low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy. We are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. However, inflation that is persistently too low poses a serious risk to the economy. He said it right then. Hey, we know it's going to be bad on you guys with low income and lost income and down there at the lower end of the income chain and all that other stuff. You're going to have to pay more for your food and gasoline and energy and shelter and all that other stuff. However, if we don't do this, all the rest of the people are going to feel pain and misery too. So, yeah, you guys are going to get it. You guys down there at the poor end. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're going to have to settle with some inconveniences up here on the upper end with all the money and stuff like that. But you people, poor people down there at the bottom end, yeah, pain and suffering and misery for you, because if we don't do it, it's going to pose serious risk for the entire economy. And so, yeah, you're going to have to take one for the team, boys. Sorry, poor people. August 27th, 2020. So once you know it, once you see it, once you understand it, and you know they're not on your side, there ain't not a single person out there who's going to be on your side to make this thing work for you. You better figure it out for yourself, and this is it right here. Right. Their communications and knowing it, knowing what they are. All right, if you comment is worth reading, it doesn't take all caps, please check your caps. All right. Some say the next 3 years should be spent doing shrooms. Oh, you guys in the shrooms. All right. I have 4 garden felons. They call me the garden felon. 2 pot and 2 shroom felons. Oh, I see it. Man, it is getting hot in this car. Okay. Oh, serious risk to the economy. Oh, thanks, gang. Love the Fed speech distillation. Yeah, thank you. Well, this is where it's all at. Like, I don't know where you're going to find this information anywhere else. Let me get some crossbreeds going in here. Okay. I don't know where else you're going to find this information other than the Federal Reserve itself, because I cannot. I look for it, guys. I really do. I would love for there to be economists that are describing where the neutral interest rate is today in relation to the Fed funds rate and how it is that the market's perception of elevated inflation expectation moves that neutral interest rate around. And I wish that there was other people who would communicate that kind of stuff, because I'm sure that they could do it in a much better fashion than the uneducated economist. I know it's happening. I know the Fed is looking at it. I cannot find anybody else who wants to talk about that. And that's sad, because if we did, then the Federal Reserve would not be able to conduct themselves the way that they are, and then we could literally end the Fed. But nobody wants to do it that way. Everybody wants to say, oh, dude, you're just a shill for the Fed and you're benefiting the Fed. And I'm thinking, man, every time you have elevated inflation expectation, you are benefiting the Fed. And that's what's happening here. And since 99% of the people look at it that way and think that the Federal Reserve screwed up and they don't know what they're doing, they're misstepping monetary policy that created this ever-expanding inflationary pressure upon the economy, the Federal Reserve's sitting over there going, God, I can't believe it works so well. They're okay with everything that has happened there. It totally saved them. There is nothing that they are concerned about at this point. Okay? I mean, not that I can see within any of their speeches, it seems to be working swimmingly. Even the idea of moving into stablecoins, the problem, right, that is faced out there and that is going to continue, and that there's very little chance of being able to fix or change without a profound impact to everybody. And I mean, like, everybody's suffering and misery, and that is the inequality is going to grow. 10 to 20% of the people are doing the majority of the consuming. 10% of the households, 10% of upper household incomes do 50% of the consumption. Think about what the top 20% are doing. They're probably doing, like, this is the way I kind of thought about it. It was just like, okay, if you had the top 10% doing 50% of the consumption out there, that would leave the bottom 90% to do the other 50% of consumption, which leaves a lot of a lot of spreading of that consumption out. But if you took the remaining 90% who were doing 50% of the consumption, I would assume that the top 10% of them would be doing 50% of the remaining 50% of consumption, which would mean that the top 20% are doing somewhere around 70 to 75% of the consumption out there. Tell me, how important are the bottom 80%? How important are they? They're not. Not in a consuming, debt-based economy. It's all about debt issuance and consumption. And that is it. And the people who are experiencing that are the people who are actively participating in the economy. Everybody else really doesn't matter to them. And that's sad. That's where I think most people end up losing their ability to look at this thing appropriately, because they think that there's a politician out there who actually cares about them, who cares about their situation and their plight. That's wrong. They don't. They only care about the top 20% because they're the only ones who are important to the active economy. That's it. The rest of us are not really that useful, except for maybe moving the stuff around. And I know that's like, it's a sad way to look at it, but this isn't me who's like saying, hey man, I'm going to tell you, and it's going to be really sad, and instead we should be talking about rainbows and kittens and stuff like that. Hey, you take it for whatever you want. I understand the situation. I ain't that really worried about it. I don't want to do that much consuming anyway. I want to load up on assets. I want to be able to be in a position in which that I don't have any expenses, and I have all these giant assets that then says, hey man, you're really secure in your world. That sounds wonderful, right? For other people, they want to fly on jets, drive fast cars, go, whatever. I mean, everybody has something different in their life. All right, 177 people watching. What do we got going on here? So what's the point to behave like I said the poor are ready to go riot? Mathematically, it's better for the masses to do the lion's share of producing and the few to do the majority of the consuming. Wouldn't math out the other way around? Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think like 80% of the people doing the producing and then sending that production overseas, so that the money that is coming into the country would then increase the standard of living of the producers. Think about it. Who has first access to the money, right? If you are a producer-saving nation and you're producing stuff and sending it out there to the world, and the world is sending money, then the money comes closer to the individual. But if you are going through debt-based issuance and it has to filter all the way through before it finally comes down to a person who's going to be retailing that item to another person, then most likely there's going to be a huge separation between the rich and the poor. So if you can get new money in from your production, then you are going to do a lot better than trying to retail that production of other nations to each other to make money, right? You got to be close to new money. See, this is where I think a lot of times people get very upset with guys like, Robert Kiyosaki, who has figured out a way to borrow money and buy cash flowing assets. And he's really good at it. And people say, oh man, he shouldn't do that. And I'm thinking, you do it. Don't tell him not to do it. You should go do it. If it's possible to do it, and you see that it's possible to do it, and he's willing to take on the risk and you're not, don't get mad. Don't get mad at that. Be thankful that there's an opportunity like that exists. But if you don't take advantage of opportunity, you're probably going to get left behind. Don't get mad at that either, right? If you are saying, I don't want to get left behind, what you're saying is you don't want opportunity either. Because if you want opportunity, unfortunately, if you don't take it, you're going to get left behind, because somebody else will take advantage of the opportunity. I love how people say, oh man, you're just like, so critical of the individual, blaming them, blaming the victim or something of that nature. And I'm thinking, you're a victim of your own circumstances. You have to recognize your position and then change. Know that if you are sitting in a position in which you are broke, blaming New World Order, blaming government, blaming something else out there for your actions, just understand that there's somebody out there who is not doing that, and they are absolutely killing it right now. Think like those guys. You think something different, for sure, because your ego is wanting to be right, that, government's holding you down and keeping you from being successful, keeping you poor, ready to riot. Or you can think, well, there is opportunity out there, and if I just ignore the BS that's out there and start pursuing that which I know is good and useful and helpful to the world, then maybe I might get rewarded for that. Weird. That's weird, huh? All right, 49 minutes into this. You guys want to keep me going? 76 likes. Hit that thumbs up button. We got 190 people watching with 76 likes. If you go get it up to 100 likes in the next 10 minutes, we'll keep going. Can spending/income consolidate even more at the top? Is that your outlook currently? No one's coming to stop. Can spending income consolidation can it consolidate even more at the top? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure who else is to be critical of besides the individual. All right. We got the deja vu dishes. All right. Glad to see you both in there. That's fun. All right. 10%, 10 to 20% of the monthly income must go into assets. If not, you and your family will remain poor. Live simple and invest more. Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, I think that's just the simple premises of it all. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear it because they think already like their life is already as cheap as they could possibly get it. But I don't think so, man. I mean, I know a guy who has a full-time job, lives in his car. He's got plenty of money. He can go buy a house anytime he wants. He's not interested in buying a house in an inflated market or anywhere in an area that's going to be expensive. He's looking to go buy a cheap house someplace else. But he is loading up right now in that position. I don't feel one bit sorry for him. Not at all. Huh? I don't feel sorry for him. Got somebody else who's got $2,000 a month rent, can barely make it, working their ass off just so they can have a roof over their head. I feel somewhat sorry for them. But I don't feel sorry for the guy in his car who's loading up on it because he's doing it right, man. Go for it. I don't feel proud of you. You know? I'm proud of that dude. Basically saying, I don't care what people think. They can think whatever they want. Right? I got money and assets and buy and go and do whatever the hell I want. And I'm choosing to live in this car and live this way so that I can have a much better future. Right? That's good. That's a good thing. You know? Faith comes from eating hash browns. Okay, I'm not going to read that stuff. You're right. I forgot to hit the button. Yeah, we got 85. We got a few more to go. 15 more likes and we'll be there. All right. America, where is your industry and factories? It's gone. We don't have that anymore because the Cantillon effect describes that pretty well. All right. You are going to move your factory, your manufacturing base out of the country to foreign producers when your standard of living has increased. That's what happened to it. Having a high standard of living is ultimately saying that you're not going to be able to produce as cheaply as somebody else out there who's willing to sleep on the ground. And when all of a sudden they're producing the same things that you're producing, but they're sleeping on the ground, you can't compete. You're done. You can't compete with that. So when you have other nations out there, emerging economies who are making stuff faster, cheaper, more efficiently, and of as high a quality, you're done. Your standard of living is too high. It will not come back, right? It won't. You can't. You know, all these tariffs and ideas, like you're basically moving against the underlying economic forces. Not saying you can't like have government subsidies and interventions and all this other stuff, but you're going to be reliant about in those government subsidies and government interventions and all that other stuff. And the more you do that, the more they have to. And then the moment that they don't, your job's gone. It just flies right overseas because it was never meant to be here in the first place because it was being put there by government subsidies and intervention. Right? Like, I mean, a good, strong economy doesn't have government intervening. You are producing the best product to sell to the world, period. They don't need anything else to make that happen. You don't need government to intervene. You don't need government to subsidize. You just do it better than anybody else can. And I understand other countries are going to subsidize and other countries are going to do all the other stuff. It doesn't really matter. You're still not going to be able to compete. You just can't. And so once you understand that you can't compete with it, then you have to understand, how do I position myself on a counter that? See, somebody wants to fix the system. That's fine. You can theorize on fixing the system all day, and it's great, fun debate, very intellectual conversations that can come from it. I totally get it, but it's kind of worthless because it's not going to happen. What is going to happen is tomorrow we're going to wake up with something of very essentially what's happening today. And if we don't understand how to motivate and deal with it today, then you're not going to be, what are you going to sit around? Okay, let's motivate and change it so that I can motivate and change. All right. And you're like, you better deal with it today. You better deal with it today and then hope for a better time in the future. But I'm going to deal with the situation as I see it today, which means that I have to move with the information that I got, which means that I cannot change the way that the political environment is going to be, or the banking system is going to be, or the way that a society is going to be. I have to internalize it for what it is and then move forward with it. Yay, talking the stuff up. Okay, sending tech jobs to India too, and shipped more of them. And Trump is moving 200,000 to take those jobs. Okay. In the small town I live in, there are 4 plastic injection companies, big ones too, been here 25 years and have expanded many times. An engine remanufacturer, a dust collection manufacturer, and a few more. Yeah, and I'm not saying like the United States, like this is what I think is funny, is that the United States was a manufacturing powerhouse where we produced the world's greatest stuff and sent it out there to the world. Now the world sends us a great amount of stuff. It doesn't mean we still don't manufacture. We just don't manufacture as much as we buy, right? We don't export as much as we buy. We can't necessarily compete and sell stuff to other producers out there in the world because other producers can make it for themselves cheaper. So this is the problem that the United States faces. We make great quality, wonderful things. Our agricultural industry for shipping agricultural products out there to the world is huge. I mean, I live in, one of the biggest tree farms in the entire country up here in the Pacific Northwest, and there are raw logs that send right over to foreign nations all day long off of the Columbia River. So agriculture is huge here in the United States, and it's a massive export market too. But it doesn't matter. All the stuff we manufacture and all the agricultural products that we export and all the other stuff doesn't even come close to the amount that we import. And that's where the trade deficit is creating the problem, where we have the ever expanding inequality that takes place, because if we had a strong middle class producing and saving and sending that product out there to the world, we would not be experiencing the economy we are today. Right? It's evolved. It's evolved away from that. No point in going back. I mean, we can go back. I mean, I like the idea of going back, but there's no way of doing it. You can't go in reverse, because in going in reverse means you have to lower your standard of living to be comparable to that of the rest of the world who's willing to sleep on the ground. Good luck. It ain't going to happen. And I don't care how much intervention and subsidized and all that other stuff. It will work. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can inflict power from the government into the economy that will then obscure the economic forces that are taking place out there. But I assure you, they will be growing underneath. And the moment that the government steps out of the way, your job will be gone. And so if you like working for the government, then just think, yeah, they could just subsidize or intervene somehow. And then you'll work for the government after that. And it won't be in a true production, strong middle class economy, because you can't build that. It will still be inequality growing in mass proportions because the underlying economic forces are still at play. All right. You wonder why a good job sucks now. It's not going to get any better. It's like that problem is not going to get any better. Where's my glasses? All right. Talk about monopolized tech. All right, I'm in Wisco, 3,000 people in my town. How do we make money with no job opportunities? I don't see that. I see the only thing I see is nothing but an abundance of opportunities. I don't understand that. I think the job opportunity that you are looking for is one. I think really what you should say is that, where are the job opportunities that's going to pay me enough to work 8 hours a day and nothing else? Is that ultimately what you're trying to say? I mean, because we got to rephrase this question. I don't see that there's no job opportunities. All I see is an abundance of opportunities out there. Now, it's not necessarily the greatest opportunity for people to do, because a lot of times people look at it and say, I'm not working that hard for so little. And I think to myself, what else are you going to do? I mean, you're going to sit around and say that I'm not going to work for so little and not work, or are you going to try and earn $1 and then earn $2 and then earn $4 and $8 and $16 because you understand where the motivation that I'm getting at here, the energy that you're moving into? This is how people do it. And I don't care if you have to go out there and work 10 hours to earn $1 on the internet, right? Maybe you have to put 100 hours to figure out how to do all the research to figure out how to make $1, right? That might be a waste of time to somebody out there, but if you can learn to make $1 and then you double it to $2 and $4, you know how valuable that is? Do you have any idea? I would put in 100 if I knew that I could figure out a way right now that I could take $1 to $2 to $4 and I had a lesson that took 100 hours to figure that out, I would do it. Huh? I've tried to figure out all kinds of different ways of making money, passive money, physically trading time for dollars, building things. I've done all kinds of ways to make money. If you can figure out a way to make $1 into $2 into $4, do it. Learn that. And if it takes 100 hours to figure that out, it will be well worth it. All right? Well worth it. I don't know why people don't do it. There's so much to do out there. There's so much. There's so many opportunities. And I think really what it comes down to is people don't want to put the time in. Because they think, oh man, if I can't get this done in the next 6 days, then I'm just going to give up and try something else next week. Well, have you ever thought about maybe committing yourself to something for 6 months or 6 years? You know how many videos I had to put out on YouTube before I ever got it monetized? Do you realize that once it was monetized, how long I had to go making videos, building up the subscriptions, building up the community, in order to make those monetized videos worth $10? Like, I remember the day I made $10 off of a video. It was so crazy. This was a long time after I had already been monetized. And I remember I was like, holy crap, I made $10 on a video. Consistently, I was making $10. And I'm thinking, wow, that's like $300 a month. That's incredible. It was shortly after that I was getting myself out of debt. I was moving into, ideas of buying a house and doing all kinds of stuff. It was just like this huge change. That change came from literally making $10 on a video, right? For most people, they look at something and say, I wouldn't put that much effort in to make $10 on a video. You know how many hours I had to dedicate to get to that point? It took forever. And I never really thought about the money. I thought to myself, I'm going to try and earn money on Google with YouTube, doing AdSense. $100 was my goal because that was the threshold that you needed in order for them to pay you. I did $100 in ad revenue. I got that money and I thought, oh, that's cool. I'm going to do that again. And it took a long time before I got paid again. But I thought, it's a matter of time. It'll happen again. I mean, even if I'm only making 97 cents on this video, I put 100 of them out, I will get $100. Sure enough, right? Got another $100. It was a little bit more that time. It was actually like $300 and something that I got in on the next one, because the videos were ramping up and people were starting to pay a lot more attention to it. And since it was partnered up with YouTube, YouTube spreads it around more. And that was it. That was like, it took a long time to get there. Some people I remember when I first met George Gammon, he had 300 subscribers or something to his YouTube channel. I gave him a shout out. Within no time, he had 10,000 subscribers. I turn around within a year, he's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. He's blowing all up all over the place. He's doing the rebel capitalist stuff. And I'm like, whoa, holy crap. I didn't know wow. I had no idea that it would go down something like that for him. Right? But he knew, he had it planned out. That is exactly what he was going to do. He had professional teams working on it and all kinds of stuff to make it happen in that fashion. Everybody does it differently. Everybody does something different. Okay, what time? Okay, we're an hour and 40. We got 97 likes. You guys missed it. All right, you're 3 likes away. I invested in the silver bullets for werewolves, but ended up getting bitten. Oh, that's a bummer. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me cruise this back up here a little ways. You have, Simon, it's called your YouTube channel. Yeah. All right, opportunity where? Yeah, go work in the construction and work 12 hours, but the economic prices don't balance out and the daily living, everything is expensive, bro. Yeah, no kidding. Okay. I mean, here, that's exactly the life that I was living 9 years ago. All right. I had recently gotten out of construction. I was moving back into working retail lumber, building supply sales, right? And wasn't making it at all. I mean, I was not making it. The money was not enough. Didn't have any benefits. My wife wasn't working. She was pregnant. I was drunk. There was no money coming in. It was a horrible existence, and I was failing miserably. Okay, so I was there 9 years ago. Okay? And in the course of the 9 years, I put myself in a much different position. And now I know a lot of people say, hey, we can't all have a YouTube channel. You're absolutely right. We all can't have a YouTube channel. Over the course of 9 years, you can build a business. Now, I don't know what skills you have. I don't know what it is that you can offer to the world, but you have something that's useful. Useful, beneficial, and the world wants it. Right? Now, if you can figure out a way to provide the world with that useful being, right, that useful human aspect that you can provide to them, like whatever it is, whether it's, doing work for them online, doing work for them in a physical manner, whatever, there is something out there that you can do. And then once you understand that there is something else out there that you can do, now you need to start looking at your life in a way that says, okay, I got my day job, which is going to take up most of my time, and it's going to be very difficult because it's barely going to cut my bills. And then I'm going to take even more time to build up a business. Okay? And if you're working 12 hours at a construction job, right, then you should probably be getting paid pretty well to be working 12 hours at a construction job. Right? Now, I know me personally, when I was working 12 hours at a construction job, the first 8 hours was regular time and 4 hours was overtime, and that was a pretty good pay. And I don't understand that if you're making that much money, you couldn't come back on some living expenses to make that 12 hours a day worthy to you. Like, if that's the case, like if you 12 hours eats up every bit of your money, then you need to find a different place to live. That's really what it comes down to, because that's too much money to be spending on your cost of living. I know, I live in that area, right? And so I had two choices. I either needed to earn more money to live in this area, the affluent area that I happen to now be in, which wasn't that way when I was growing up here, but it has quickly moved into that. I either needed to make more money, or I would need to move away. That was it. Those were my two choices. Otherwise, I was going to be suffering the consequences of working 12 hours a day and not being able to make it here because of the location that I'm in. So luckily for me, over the course of the previous years, since I gave up drinking alcohol and moved into an idea that I was going to start building up this YouTube channel or building up a business. I do side hustles. I do my day job. I do this YouTube thing. I do all kinds of affiliate sales and stuff like that all online, trying to figure out how it is that I can get more cash flow in. I spend way, way more than 12 hours a day doing this. Sometimes outside of the few hours of sleep that I get at night, I'm doing this 100% of my time, is in the pursuit of chasing excellence, money, income, paying off debts, doing all the stuff. And then occasionally I try to set it all down so I can give my family focused energy. It's not easy. I don't know what it is that you expect. Like, I mean, you might see me on this channel, like kind of kicking back and relax and all this other stuff. Do you realize I put in constant time and effort? Constant. If it's not at a day job, if it's not on, YouTube, if it's not on, out there calling the bingo game, it's doing research, answering emails, looking at comments, going through it all. Right? It's a constant thing. And if that's what you are doing and you're doing something like that and you're still failing, you need to get in a different location. That's the problem. Your location is preventing you from succeeding. Very much like this location was going to prevent me from succeeding if I didn't do something about it. I had to increase my income and lower my expenses. That's why I don't drive a new car. I live in a rich area. All right. The cheapest house, like the average house around here, is well over $500,000. The working class individual who's, you know, slinging lumber down there at the hardware store is not going to be able to afford a house in this area. It doesn't work like that. All right, this is not going to happen. Some areas in the country, you could probably work at a hardware store and do really good in lumber sales and have enough to buy a house. This isn't one of them. If I had started the process of buying a house years ago, I might be able to continue to make the payments in today's in today's economic environment. But for the most part, if I was to move here, it would suck. Right? Unless I had a business or had some sort of family help or something like that, to move to Astoria as just a regular old working class dude would be a horrible experience. You wouldn't make it. It would be tough. It would be so hard. Right? I mean, I don't know. It just would be. All right. You're an inspiration, especially as a mentor to the younger people that listen. You offer great common sense advice, and I have learned a lot from listening to your channel. Thank you. Well, thank you. What is that? Alabaster? Alabaster jar? Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And, somebody called me a great life coach the other day, and I tried to say, no, man, I'm not a life coach. That's not the intentions of what it is that I'm doing out here, because I don't think that I'm really anybody who is qualified to give you any kind of life coaching, in that fashion. I do like sharing my experiences and telling my story and talking about the recovering from alcohol and stuff, because at first I didn't like that, and I didn't feel good about it, and I was somewhat embarrassed and all that other stuff by telling people. But the more I did it, the more I realized how helpful and useful that is to other people who are struggling, who need to figure out something in their life that's going to tell them, yeah, it's okay, you can do it, because it's going to be hard and painful and a difficult experience. And when I tell people, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a hard, difficult experience, but the rewards that you get from it is quite extreme. And here's the battles that I went through and how I was able to deal with it. Holy crap, right? I mean, talk about having something that you feel like you actually made a difference in this world. That was it. And now I don't feel like I'm qualified to do any of that. I really don't. I mean, I'm not trained therapist. I'm not understanding of I didn't read the big book. I didn't do any of the stuff that would give me a position to say, hey man, you should be inspiring and coaching people through life. What? No, not me. Right? That's I'm still trying to figure that thing out, right? For somebody to say you should be doing that for other people. I'm thinking, I don't know, right? I'm trying to get there, and I think that, other people out there who are looking at that story saying, hey man, that inspires me. I like that. But for somebody to say, man, you should do this, and I'm thinking, I'm just going to continue to tell my story, and if it inspires and helps, awesome. But to actively try to say, hey man, let me give you some life coaching advice, I don't think I'm qualified for that. I really don't. Yeah. I mean, you think about it, 40 years, I screwed it up bad, right? And then really figuring it out is stumbling through the last 9 years, trying to figure out how it is that you operate without alcohol, without being in an alcohol-based consciousness. I don't know how many people realize if you drink every single day, you are living in alcohol-based consciousness, where everything has this lens that you view is through alcohol. And it's weird. It's your life changes completely when you remove that from your life, right? And you don't have that alcohol-based consciousness anymore. You're looking at the world, your interactions with the world is a whole different experience. It changes completely. One of the things that I found is that opportunity really started to present itself after I gave up alcohol. And you know what the biggest limitation was from the opportunities, why I wasn't getting those opportunities when I was drinking, is because I would literally limit myself from being able to receive them. Nope, because at 5 o'clock, I'm going to the bar. All opportunities gone, right? See, the moment that I say, I can't do it after work, there's nothing I can do after work because I'm going to be drinking, right? All opportunities gone. wiped out, wiped clean. See, now when somebody says, hey, I would love to do an interview, can you do an interview for the channel or something of that nature? It'd be like, yeah, let's do it after work. Opportunities galore. All kinds of things I can do after work, but not if I'm drinking. If I'm drinking, nah, I don't think so. I'm not gonna go and put out effort when I'm drinking. I'm gonna be partying. None of you can afford new refrigerant. Huh. No money, but I listen and learn. Well, here's the thing. Have a successful fishing season. Yeah, right on, Brody, talking to All-Nighter. Right on. Much love, everyone. Alrighty, All-Nighter. We got another fishing period in 3 hours. I got to take a nap. I'll keep this playing for the algo. Right on. Yeah, take her easy, man. I hope you're having a great time up there. Party was my business in the 20s, and business was good. All the day trade scamming channels are pretty much gone away, but I used to always ask them the question, if you so successful at day trading, why aren't you spending all this time and energy and money putting out free videos a day trying to sell other people on your day trading scheme? Why not just go make millions of dollars day trading? Yeah. It's not true. Brain cells don't replace themselves, but don't drink alcohol. Why are some ways you go about identifying marketable skills? What are some ways you can go about marketable skills can build a personal brand? Being good at something is one thing, but being in the right area is, as you say, a fluid experience. I don't know. Like, everybody has something different in their life that they have to do. And I find things really unique. Like, a friend of mine, like I've told this story before, he developed the better mousetrap. Like, he came up with a clam gun. Now, I know a lot of you who don't live on the coast or maybe not into seafood. Razor clams are a huge popular item out here on the Pacific Northwest that a lot of people go out there and harvest off the beach, right? So the clam gun is pretty simple. It's like, a cylinder, right? And they shove that down into the sand, and they got a little hole at the top. You cap it, and like a straw, you pull out all the sand, and the clam is hopefully in that clump of sand that you're pulling out of the beach. So anyway, he just came up with a better idea for one, right? Stainless steel, it's like has like this breather tube that runs down the side, so it's easier to suck the sand out of the beach, and it's just like this better clam gun, right? Sells like crazy, sells them all over the world, not just here locally, but he sells them at the stores, he sells them all over the country, he sells them to foreign nations, he sells them over to foreign nations. People all over the place buy these particular clam guns, and he makes a killing doing it. He says it just blows him away every month, like 100 and something clam guns to this, another 200, whatever. He talks about all this stuff that he does. And now, I never would have thought in a million years that something as simple as a clam gun would be as successful of an item to sell as this guy has made it. You can look it up. It's called the Claminator. It's a good one, right? But that's his skill. I don't know. There's all kinds of people out there who do little side hustles for things. I have a friend who does painting, like interior painting. Like, I don't know how she gets the jobs. I mean, I think it's just word of mouth. She does like house cleaning and interior painting, and I don't think she advertises or anything. And she has tons of work, from that, doing side hustle. It's up like, I think a lot of times people are wanting to like click on the computer and then say, okay, now it generates money. Look at the money machine go. Do, 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 do. Well, it doesn't quite work like that, right? I mean, it can in some ways. There's probably like online stores that you could set up or in that fashion and, like hit go and it would just start producing money. But for the most part, you have to have continuous effort. And a lot of things like this YouTube channel, after I'm done putting out the video, it continues to, get spread out there and then continues to collect a little bit of revenue. And whether I put a video out or not, it kind of trickles in pennies throughout the day. So things like that, passive income, and something that you can do, like work on for a few hours, and then it'll go and start making money. Think of things like that. I don't know what it is that's out there that you have for a skill that you can do that with, but YouTube's a great way to get in that energy of just literally putting out a video of how to do something, right? And that's what's funny about it is that I met a guy at the Rebel Capitalist who had like 600 and something thousand subscribers to his YouTube channel, and it was about home improvement. He's not even into like the home improvement industry. He's more of like a developer kind of guy. But, he does these videos on home improvement, and one of them was how to change an outlet, how to change a wall outlet. Like, how many YouTube videos are out there on how to change a wall outlet? There's probably, thousands upon thousands of them. Well, he put one out like literally a couple of months before he had gone to the Rebel Capitalist, and it had something like 800,000 views. And I'm like, wow, on a video that has been done millions of times. All right, he puts out one himself, does wonderful. So I tell people all the time, don't limit what it is that you can do out there. Just go and make how-to videos. How to do whatever it is that you're good at or whatever it is that you like. You like Dungeons and Dragons? Like, I don't know that game. I have no clue. I just know that it exists out there. I bet you could build a YouTube channel off of it. My wife dishes every day. Right? Does videos of chores around the house. Doesn't say anything. Just sets up the camera, does the dishes, vacuums the floor, makes the bed, whatever. She has 600 subscribers to her channel. Some of her videos get 5,000, 6,000 views. Weird, right? I mean, who would have known? But it's an ASMR thing. And I've had people who had messaged saying like, yeah, this is great background noise. Some people like just want to hear it for something to go on in the house because they're lonely or whatever, and they just need some house noise, typical household noises like dishes or vacuums or something like that going on. People are using it to sleep to. Who knows? Who knows why they're watching? Maybe some people are just perverted and just want to see, a lady vacuuming. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of weirdos out there too. Ultimately, being though, is that there is so much that you can do and I think the problem that people block themselves with is that they don't think what they are doing is valuable and therefore not marketable and therefore not worthy. And that's where I think the failure begins. Is that they just don't realize that everything is worthy so long as it's helpful and useful. And if you are truly trying to be helpful and useful, you'll get rewarded for that. I can't tell you what your skill is. I can't tell you what a marketable skill is for you. I know here in my area, there's a need for handyman. So if you happen to have an established life, you got a good job or whatever, and you're paying your bills and you got all that other stuff, doing handyman work. Like, there was a couple who were in the store. I work at a hardware store. There was a couple, and they were an elderly couple who were probably in their 80s or whatever, and they had a smoke detector that was beeping, right? Chirping all night long. And they're an old couple. They didn't want to get up on the stool because, if they fall over, it could be over for them. That would be done, right? So they were scared to get up on this higher ceiling smoke detector to swap out the battery, and they were willing to pay somebody $50 to go out there and swap this battery out. And I thought to myself, man, there is a growing community of people who are very similar to this. There is a need for handymen who would do something very similar to that. But other areas, that may not be a very successful business, right? It just happens to be our area with this growing retirement community and less like handyman and carpenters that are around to do that sort of work. All right. What time is it? It's an hour and 24. We're gonna call this quits here before too long. All right. But it's a gamble just like at the casino. The longer you sit at that table and play, the more you lose. It is losing proposition. No, that's not to say that it cannot make swing trades and day trade. I guess you guys are talking stocks. I like this one. Just learn how to invest in solid stocks. You have to learn how to make money because a lot of people don't have the money to invest in stocks. You can't just say, hey, just go and learn to invest in stocks and be good. It doesn't work like that, all right? Most people, like I know when I graduated high school, I was on my own. Sarah and I had graduated high school trying to rent an apartment, have jobs, and live in that apartment, and it was very difficult, and there was certainly no money at the end of the month. There was nothing I could do. Right? And even the thought of it now was like, man, if I could have saved an entire month's of pay, like Sarah and I were able to save our paychecks for an entire month, I think it would have been somewhere around $800, right? Like maybe $1,000. Well, $1,000 today, comparatively to back then, it looked like it would have been almost useless. Had I invested $1,000 back then, it would probably worth who knows how much, depending on where it went. So that's like huge to think about, right? I couldn't do it at the time. So if I had the mindset back then to not go and buy weed with whatever little money that I did have, or if I did earn money to not go buy weed and alcohol with it, but instead to drop that into the Dow Jones or the S&P or something of that nature, the NASDAQ even at the time, before it ran up on the, ran up in the dot-com boom, life would be so much different. But that wasn't like an option at the time. It didn't feel like an option. And I didn't think for it to be an option because at the time I just wanted to work my 8-hour job and then go get stoned. Right? Because I was 18. That's what I thought. Continuous effort. What does that say? Iterative improvement. Ultimately creating some value somewhere and figuring out how to scale. Definitely an entrepreneur mindset, much wisdom. Yeah, here's the thing. I had a friend who moved to town here, and I'm going to call it quits after the story, though. I had a friend who moved to town, and she had a car and a vacuum cleaner. And that's it. And she started vacuuming houses and offices and, people's workplace, building up a cleaning business. So ultimately, she worked out of her car and didn't have really any tools. She built it all up and built up a client list and made a pretty good living cleaning houses, right? And after she had been doing this for, I forget, like 6, 7 years, building up this client list, she sold it off for like a lot, $100,000 or something like that. She just literally sold the list of clients. Like that was the business. That was her whole business, was vacuuming, cleaning houses, building up that clientele list, right? Because that was ultimately the business, was the clientele list, right? Getting all the clients' numbers and all that other stuff and building up that established monthly, cleaning service or weekly cleaning service that she was doing. And then once she had that, that was value. And she sold that. And that was incredible to think, right? It was just like the whole game wasn't to clean the houses. It was to get the clients. It was to get the list of people so that you could sell that off. How many people think like that? I listened to that story and I'm like, brilliant. She didn't really want the cleaning business. And by the time she was done, she had already established, gotten, married, met they were all doing other things. And she was like, this business, she didn't want it anymore. She just didn't, I'm sure she probably could have continued to run it, but she was like, hey, I'd rather have the $100,000 and move on to something else in my life. And that's exactly what she did, And I'm thinking, that's super brilliant, Businesses are meant to be built and sold. Creating a family and contributing to society is very important. Social media has destroyed Generation Z. See, now I kind of disagree with it some. Here I am using social media to spread what I feel is a good message, especially for understanding the economy and understanding positioning yourself for it. And if it wasn't for social media, I never would have had this opportunity. So it's absolutely, enhanced my life in so many beneficial ways. And what I feel has enhanced somebody else's life who's come to me and said, "Hey, man, thank you for putting out some of these videos. I've really changed and inspired me to do something to better and more useful with my world." And I'm thinking to myself, awesome, man, because I didn't think I was going to be able to do that for myself at one point in my life, let alone inspire somebody else to do that too. So I think that's all about the meaning you've given it, especially when it comes to social media. Alrighty, guys, this was a lot of fun, but I am going to call it quits at the hour and a half mark. We got 122 people still watching. Thank you so much for joining in on today's live stream. There are plenty of links down in the description talking about how it is that the Federal Reserve's communication is their main policy tool and how that may be shifting soon. I think that's really important stuff to really internalize. And knowing that as the summer goes on, this is going to change. There's going to be a change in the way their strategy is being conducted and the communications part of it. So YouTube is an oasis of stimulus. Phone games hypnotize kids and rot their brains. I know Freddie's big into them too. Generation Z does use social media the same way you do, Simon. You got to play with dirt as a kid. These Generation Z's kids never get out of the house. Yeah, and I kind of agree in a lot of sense with that. Like, being Generation X is probably one of a very unique. Like, I know every generation is going to say they're very unique, but we're really unique in that sense that we still have somewhat of an old school mentality, having like, hey, go outside and play in the dirt and play with sticks and stones and hit each other and, all the other stuff, and you'll figure it out, and bully experience and all the like awesome gatherings and parties of birthdays and neighborhood, block party kind of things, stuff that doesn't exist, right? Like nowadays, here's the funny thing. I remember boxing gloves at the grade school. They were huge. They were like so big. There was no way that you could hit each other with these things and hurt each other, right? I mean, you could barely even swing them around. And I'm thinking, where did those things go? Like it used to be a time you could put those things on and go play around with them, man. And I think, man, a couple of guys who need to have it out, put on these giant pillows at the school and go swing it out and get that aggression out. What happened to that stuff, right? These are the experiences that we used to have as kids, right? But those things are gone. And then as we started transferring into like technologies and videoing of everything of your entire life, and there was no like okay, the difference between having a movie that you watched and then go home and relive the movie, right? Like to be outdoors playing and saying like you're part of one of the characters that you remember from the movie. Well, now you can watch that movie a million times over and over again. You don't have the same experience from it, right? It's a whole different experience on the information that you're even gathering in today. And so I think about that, where the technology shift and how it is that we communicate with each other and how it is that we internalize the information. We have literally disintegrated a lot of the creative imagination that came from the experience of going to the movie, right? You go to the movie, you watch it, you go home and you think about it and you're like, wow, this is crazy. How it is that you can interpret like this movie into the dreams of your experience going into all the stuff that you have. So like I know this is kind of like weird psychobabble sounding, but ultimately the experiences that you have had from the limitation of how much you are actually receiving gave you a much better quality of life that you could experience from it. Well, now you're bombarded all day long with all this stuff. It's completely screwing up your experience. It's an obscured experience now that you get from it. I don't know how to quite describe that. Basically, a bunch of garbage that came in was limited back in the day. You were very purposeful on what it is that you were taking in for information. Now, information just overloads you, and it may be information you didn't even want to get. Like you're thinking about like rolling through TikTok videos or something of that nature. You may roll across TikTok videos that you didn't want to watch, but you were forced into it essentially because it was the next one. And that's the difference inside of it. Now you have to deal with an experience of life that has this TikTok video in your mind. You know, you're overloaded with the information. Does that make sense? I don't know if any of that made sense. Maybe it only makes sense to me. All right. I'm young millennial generation X-parents. Guys, I'm gonna go. I gotta get things to do. I could be hanging out here all day with you, but I got chores to get done and other things happening. You guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.